Hey guys, this is I Purple from Mount Silver. We've got something special for you. This is the very first Round Summit, a podcast style sit down specifically about VGC. Today I'm joined by a very special panel. I'm going to give them a chance to just introduce themselves. Justin?
Hey everyone, I'm Justin Burns. As many of you may know, I've been playing VGC since 2014. I've cut a lot of regionals over the years. Most recently, I won 2 regionals, one in 2017 and one this season. And I've also gotten second at the 2018 North American International Championships and third at the 2019 Oceania International Championships.
Awesome, man. We're glad to have you. Kunal?
Hey guys, I'm Kunal. I've been playing VGC since VGC 17, but this year, VGC 19 is my first year playing live events. It's been a great time so far. Went to 5 or 6 regionals, did decent at maybe one of them. But yeah, it's been fun.
Good man. Glad to have you. Joe?
Yeah, hey guys, Joe Sifugarte here, or Joe UX9, as a lot of people know me. I'm coming off of, I've been playing VGC for about 2 years now. And I'm coming off of a top 32 nationals win. I missed Worlds, but other than that, yeah, season going.
May have cut out there just towards the end, but yeah, man, we're glad to have you. And then lastly, Addy.
Hey guys, my name is Adi. I'm playing VGC in real life tournaments since 2017, but I've been playing online since 2015. This is my first time qualifying for Worlds, but I've gone next to it a bunch of regionals, and I cut one of them last year.
Awesome, man. Glad to have you. We've got a really good showing of different levels. I know Justin's been to a couple Worlds. Lou, I know you went in 17, I believe 18 as well.
A weird year. One, I want to say thank God I'm not having to list my accomplishments right after Justin, because
yeah.
But I've been playing since like 2016. I cut a regional in 2017. I made Worlds in 2017. In 2018, I think I only went to 1 or 2 regionals. One of them didn't make Worlds. And then this season, 2018, I went to 1 regional, cut one of them, make Worlds. And then this season, I got second at Portland and got my invite in the first couple months. So I've been kind of kicking it back since then for the most part.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So we'll get straight into it, guys. So I guess the first conversation that we're going to talk about is why is Wolf winning Worlds? But on a serious note, guys, no, I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on where the meta is, if you've seen any recent shifts, or just anything that kind of stood out to you in the meta right now. So Justin, why don't you kick it off for us, man?
All right, so I have been paying close attention to what teams people are using, how they're using them. Partially because I am playing the Worlds, and I definitely need to be prepared for that. But also I have also been involved in helping write the power rankings on Pokemon.com going into NAIC and the upcoming World Championships. And so, I think the general consensus is that there are 3 big archetypes that you're going to see a lot of play at Worlds.
I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag because on the one hand, there's, their online tournaments. People may not be willing to show off what they have in their pockets for Worlds. But on the other hand, some of these tournaments have pretty good prizing. So I'd wager that people are trying pretty hard, at least. Whether or not their teams are actually what they're taking to Worlds, I think that a lot of thought still went into some of these teams. So it's worth taking a look at. For example,
I'd agree with that. I think that the biggest thing with the online tournaments is, and I do agree, it's a mixed bag. Also because your player pool is a little different. Or I think it's going to have a lot more like culmination of like different ideas and team compositions. Especially like even just like comparing like the different like metas, like the Japanese meta, like when you were looking at like just like all their streams. Obviously their streams were kind of like of like X3s and X4s and stuff, but like still like if you look at like a lot of the Top Cut streams, like Ryoga's really popular there, based on the new innovation on that core from Japan. And then in the United States, maybe there's going to be more of an innovation towards Kang Torn or something to answer that.
I think
It's
that
going to
one
be
of the
interesting.
Yeah, and I think one of the more, nitty-gritty details, and not broadly in general, isolating how I think exactly the meta is going. One of the big things is I think less people are going to be running the Roar Kangaskhan version that we've seen everywhere because, Arash won the last Zelda tour. The low kick over Roar was also on Flavio's team that got top 8 and lost to Wolf in the quarterfinal. But yeah, I think that version of the Kang team with, I think, what does it have? Does it have Roar on the Groudon instead? Or
No, I think I forgot what it was. I don't. Yeah, I can actually look it up right now.
yeah, but that's I think one of the more like nitty-gritty meta changes, or like meta, really a call, but one of the like main changes we're gonna see, because before, I think Internet, then Arash Zelda Tour, it was way standard to have Roar with Kang on the Zerndon teams and have low kick on it on the Lunala and Zern. But now with Arash doing so well with low kick, obviously low kick, I think that you can more than likely expect to see low kick King on a lot of Zerndon, especially if they have instant Roar.
Yeah. So looking at it, Pato did run Roar on his Groudon, and he ran Bite on his Kangaskhan. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Then it was a
Like-
Rosh with.
what you said.
But yeah, in either case, I think that low kick is one of the things that's going to be kind of a toss up for a lot of Kang players as well. Do I go Roar? Do I go low kick? But with the Rosh's success, I think it tilts the lever a little bit more towards the low kick choice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of talking about Kang, and it is a mega, and we've kind of had a couple of prevalent megas, I guess. Stay consistent, being Mega Kang and Gengar. Do you guys see any other megas or even just Pokemon in general that are gonna pop up maybe and have a increased usage at Worlds?
I think Metagross is a big one. And you saw it on Ashton's team at Nationals, and you also saw it on Jonathan Evans' team. And you also saw it in a bit of top 32 and top 16, top 62, or whatever. Yeah, I believe. But I think that's definitely going to be a team that's or it's going to be a mega that's important because it does give you a good, or fairly good X-ray matchup, and it also too is just an overall good mega. It's strong, it hits hard, it deals with Journey as well. Right now, I feel like its best partner is probably Evital, which can be a little awkward for it, and because obviously Evital is a little bit weird in the meta right now. I don't think it's necessarily the best. I don't think it's the worst. I think it's kind of in a weird middle spot right now. So I would probably expect to see a Metagross on an Evital build, but it could be on something else, something like Jonathan Evans' team maybe. But
Yeah, I really like the Ryoga core with Metagross Mimikyu on it right now. That Raghav ran at Nats. I think that core is pretty strong. It has good answers to both other top archetypes in X-Ray and Zerndon, as well as some of this newer stuff that's popping up like Zernogre, obviously the Lunala Ogre that plays second at NEIC, and Ray Lunala as well is something that's been popping up. I think that players should be looking out for at Worlds, even though it may seem like kind of a best of one ladder meme. We saw it do pretty well in the temporal VGC tournament. I think Mao got top 8 with it.
And it also got top 8 at the Mount Silver Tour as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely go ahead.
Go ahead.
All I was gonna say was another Mega 2 I just want to throw in before Lou gets back into his point was actually Lucario. You see it on XL a lot, but I ended up playing, so in the practice tournament, I ended up playing Whimsicott Lucario, and it had Taunt and it had Sub Lucario, and that combination was really good against the standard Kang, and I was using Kang, Instant, Amoonguss, Xerneas, which a lot of players I'm sure are thinking of bringing because it's just a strong core to support Xerneas. and it was rough. It like Taunt Whimsicott gets around like Amoonguss. It was like a little like niche thing that I noticed, but it's actually like very solid if you think about like how like common Amoonguss, Incineroar, and all those mons are around it. Anyways, sorry Lou to interrupt.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna touch upon the Raynala core a little bit. I think that's one of those cores that is interesting, you know, and it has like a few matchups that it's really really good against. But the problem is it's good against like standard stuff, right? But at the World Championships, right? We're talking about World. I don't really think that a large majority of the field is good. I think they're gonna have like cores, right? But I feel like a lot of people are gonna have text on their that ironically enough just kind of crap on Raynala because as someone who tested it out on ladder a lot, every time I would face off against the standard teams, okay, it'd be just like mopping the floor with them. But whenever I would come across, you know, certain texts that were on, not even just for Raynala, but for other things in general, like a lot of different Pokemon just with Roar on them, or like Snarl Incineroar, like they were just a very, and even just Z move Incineroar for a lot of Raynala teams, you know, have eliminated Incineroar, like Nihilego was, but even Nihilego sometimes have problems, and they're especially with Raynala can't delete bulky Groudon, right? So it's just really hard when you're using Raynala to find all the pieces that can deal with all the standards. And with Worlds, with people also having techs on their team and having tons of stuff that the core just wouldn't be prepared to face off against. I don't know. I think it's definitely a risky call.
Well, I think I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about Lunala in general, because when we were listing out the cores that we were looking out for, we didn't mention Lunala at all, and Lunala's had some really strong finishes over the course of this year, but it really kind of dropped off other than Graham's finish at NAIC. And like we've kind of written it off, but I think Lunala enables very creative team building just because it is one of the best speed control mons in the game. And right now the big problem with Lunala, from what I've seen, is that Kangaskhan is everywhere, and Kangaskhan is probably the best Lunala counter out there. But I'm really curious to see if Lunala can get back onto the top 8, top 4 stage.
Yeah, my issue with Lunala mostly, I think the problem is it's like all of its partners, like they do different things for it, but then it feels kind of like restrictive too, because I think by far I would argue that it's the best Lunala core just because that one offers, I think, the most creative team building. Build around that pair. Lunadon is just right now in a heavy like Kyogre meta, and I do think it will still be kind of heavy going into Worlds. I don't think that Lunadon is going to benefit too well, and I think it always wants Trick Room up, and like having an archetype, I think that like 100% depends on like control option isn't amazing unless like you're really confident that you can always get up that option. Along with that, Lunala also, I feel like a lot of it's always weak to Incineroar. Like XL, like I was talking to Kyle about this like a few days ago, and Kyle's like the biggest problem with XL is it loses to Snarl and Incineroar, and it's like with the restricted that struggles so much with such a common Pokemon. I think it's very hard to support it in the right way you want with one restricted when you want it with that other restricted to do so many things for it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing also with Lunala is a lot of its partners, other than Xerneas, obviously can't hit Ray effectively, and especially like the AV variants of Ray, you know, Lunala can't hit it very well. Its partners can't hit it very well, so you set up speed control and it's easily stalled out. Or if you set up Trick Room, for example, you know the instant is always underspeeding both of your restricteds in almost every case. And so with Lunala Groudon, you struggle pretty hard, I think, to kill the Incineroar or to get it off the field and stop it from, you know, just pivoting around, spamming Intimidate, faking out to stall out the Trick Room. So that's why, like, as somebody who's used Lunala Groudon all year, Rayquaza has always been the biggest issue because Groudon can't hit it very well. And especially with the AV variants, you need Psyshock on Lunala to hit it, which means that you're forced into Tailwind almost every time. And that's, especially with Tornking popping up now, like, it's not really feasible, I think, to go for an exclusively Tailwind build with Lunala. Which is why I actually think it's pretty interesting, the Lunala Rayquaza matchup, or the archetype rather, because you have a way to hit a lot of restricteds very hard with Ray, and giving it speed control to do that seems like it would be pretty good. But obviously, like Lee said, it's pretty hard to get all the parts together, I think, to be able to cover every matchup.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think Rayquaza is always, and I think that's a problem with a lot of Groudon teams. Rayquaza is just so prominent right now. It really makes Groudon struggle a bit. I mean, Kyogre is manageable as long as your partners deal with it. I noticed with my Radon team, it was never the actual like Kyogre that was the issue. It was always like about getting rid of Rayquaza, because Rayquaza is always the one that threatens like Groudon teams. Say like that's probably my that's probably my thoughts about like most Lunala teams too. I think that's why XL in terms of like it's best because it gets rid of one of the most popular megas, but at the same time that also makes it struggle with Incineroar. So you can't really get like 100% what you want out of the team unless like you have a new like really creative build, which I don't think is plausible right now, but I could be proven wrong.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I've been playing in a lot of Japanese best of 3 tournaments online recently, and Lunala Kyogre is like really, really big in Japan. With the Lunala usually carrying Trick Room, and they have a separate Tailwind mon on the team, like Salamence, or I've seen Talonflame, I've seen Togekiss, I've seen all kinds of mons in that slot. And obviously, like they're online tournaments, so what we said earlier still kind of holds true. We're not facing the same crowd of people that we would at Worlds, but I do think that it's something to consider, that Lunala Kyogre might be seeing some pretty good advancement before heading into Worlds here, especially on the international stage.
Yeah.
I think, just for me, now obviously I'm nowhere near the level of player that you guys are on, but I think Lunala is something that I've personally been testing, just because besides, things like King, Incen, and even the random Yveltal, there's very few things that take that Z move very well. It's even, doing 50-ish% to Kyogre. But, King is an issue. But it's interesting to see that you guys that you guys think that Lunala could do well. I think that's pretty much the World's preview as far as the Mons go, unless you guys had anything else that you wanted to add. I think that's a pretty good summary of where the meta is at. So before we moved on to the next topic, did you guys have anything else that you wanted to add in on top of that?
I've got one thing.
Go ahead.
I think as far as non-restrictors go, we've seen Tapu Koko kind of like come back from almost very little usage at the start of Ultra Series, and we've seen it kind of fade away and then come back in all of the meta games we've played since the start of Generation 7. So it'll be interesting to see if it keeps getting stronger, as the fast Z move set can be really oppressive, but it's also got other excellent sets. So I'd say that's a Pokemon to look out for too.
Yeah, and to add on to that, if we have a little bit of time, actually, I think it would be pretty interesting to talk about some of these non-restricted cores that we're seeing that are kind of archetype independent. So, for example, earlier in the format, we saw Incenfini as like kind of a standard balanced duo on every single team, right? Like we were seeing it on Zerndon, we were seeing it on X-Ray, we were seeing it on Rayogre. And then recently, I think, I don't really know where it originated. Maybe it was the Japan Nationals, but Incen, Koko, Rayquaza has become a pretty strong core that we see kind of, yeah. So I'm interested at least to see if you guys have any others that you'd like to talk about, or we could see maybe the impact that these cores might have on team building going into Worlds.
Yeah, I definitely. I can talk about this a little bit from my experience at Nationals, like using stuff like Crobat and Ferrothorn. Like it was interesting because in ways like the way like the Mons were being played, they felt like their own kind of little cores. Koko and Crobat have really good lead potential if you're running a really offensive team. The way I would play it is I would always lead, and you do a Farium nuke, shut down another Tailwinder, and then get your own Tailwind up, or have Taunt to shut down another Tailwind, and you have like obviously 2 really fast Mons on the field. like pair that I also use that I think was solid at the time. I'm not sure how it is now. I still think as long as Lunala doesn't become too prominent, Coco Ferrothorn was pretty reliable for me as a Rayogre answer. It's really strong because you have the Coco to constantly pressure, obviously the Kyogre, Fairy and Z to pressure Rayquaza, and then you have Ferrothorn in the back, which is a win condition to remove the mons you need to, or set up an in-game that's favorable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Were there any other cores? I know we saw, like Kunal said, a lot of Finny Ensign. Have you guys noticed any of those cores drop out recently in usage? I think that could also, kind of play into like where the meta is headed if we've seen, cores drop out.
One Pokemon I think has kind of dropped in usage a lot, especially for the format. Like, sure, Amoonguss is still like super popular, right? I'm not saying not like a popular, not a good mon, but compared to the start of Ultra Series, I think Amoonguss is the Pokemon that kind of dipped the most. And I'm not quite sure the reason for that. Maybe just because Rayquaza and Coco have become a lot more popular, so it's been a lot harder. And well, I mean, Phoenix kind of always been popular, right? I don't think that much, but Rayquaza mainly has been the one that I think really proven to be one of not the most dominant Pokemon in the format. Part of that probably plays into the Moon going down a lot. Also, the Scarf Lele as well is another variant or another mon that people have been trying to as well. So that probably hurt Moongus usage a little bit, but that probably doesn't cover most of why Moongus has gone down. If you guys have any other ideas on.
I also think that it's a lack of Trick Room teams that means that it isn't nearly as good anymore. Just because you don't really like, even looking at the NAIC teams, you don't really see any teams that use Trick Room other than Jonathan Evans' Mimikyu team. Like, you don't see as much Stakataka anymore just because of Earth Power Ray being everywhere. You don't see as much Bronzong. Bronzong's basically been wiped off the map. Mungus all of a sudden goes from this mon that's really, really good, really functional Pokemon in Trick Room to like losing half of its functionality with teams not running Trick Room
Yeah,
anymore.
that's another thing that I was thinking of. Bronzong especially is an interesting case, and Stakataka. Both because, like, in the matchups that they would be good in, like X-Ray, I think they could be really solid. Them is they have their own inherent issues with them. Like Bronzong, a little weak to Lunala, which is an issue. Stakataka really weak to Rayquaza Earth Power, which isn't good either. I think they both have their validity, and they're just, it needs to be on the right team. And I don't think they fit exceptionally or have fit better than other options, which is why I think Trick Room has kind of been something that's been avoided.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, a shift of the Groudon set.
I think Incineroar is really disruptive to Trick Room right now. So
yeah.
Fake out, and its typing matchup against most Trick Room setters. It can really disrupt with fake out stopping it from setting Trick Room, and fake out burning through Trick Room turns, and it's really hard to make use of good Trick Room to when there's an Incineroar around.
Yeah. I would argue.
Like, no, you can go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I would argue. I have been like looking at a lot, and I think a lot of the teams are. I wouldn't say weak, but I'd say a little disrespectful to Trick Room because it's not really something that people are concerned about right now. Because I feel like most teams really don't use the Trick Room option. Obviously, like it was being said, the Jonathan Evans team had a form of Trick Room on the team, and that was solid. The mons were max speed Kyogre and stuff like that. It wasn't stuff that was fully like hard Trick Room. And I think that if someone can find a good way to implement Trick Room where it's, I would say eccentric or more like core focus of the team, then it could end up being like a solid pick. Obviously, what people are saying, you can stall out Incineroar, fake out, which is always an issue. And maybe finding a way to address that could make a team like that better.
Lou, you had something to add to that?
Oh no, I was just gonna add on to what Justin was saying about how Incineroar is really, really good at stopping, and how that also kind of hurts. Is why this kind of role in that regard. Because also, I think one of the most, or the most actually, is definitely Snarl, right? And especially if you're underspinning primals, facing off against the primal Kyogre, click Snarl and all of the momentum you have in Trick Room.
Yeah.
You're not picking up KOs. That berries are popping that you don't want to get popped. Protects are coming out next turn. That Incineroar is U-turning, so you don't even get to hit it again with another water type attack. Like, it's just all the momentum stalled. Then Trick Room ends, and then you're slower than everything you get. So,
Yeah.
I think that's also another.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, especially instant is always going to be prevalent. I guess it's just about, if not completely, taken over the role of king of VGC since we've seen Landris, you know, decline ever since Intimidate Incineroar came out. Like you said, Instant can snarl, then it can U-turn to bring in Intimidate, and so it's really preventing a lot of mons from getting off those big damage attacks. And like I said, things are surviving, and once things are surviving, then they're basically retaliating and nearly killing, and putting a lot of offensive pressure. And I think, like you guys said, Ensign definitely helps with that a lot. To keep things moving, obviously I would love to be able to sit here with you guys forever and talk about the metagame, but to kind of keep things within a relatively good time frame, we do have to move on to the next section, which I think is where a lot of players, especially newer players, are going to really enjoy, and that's the player mentality. So there's three things that I wanted to hit on within this section, and that's kind of the player mentality in team building and prepping for worlds, which kind of goes in hand with the preparation, like the mentality before worlds, and then also the mentality of day one worlds, and then I think Justin could probably give us a lot more insight, the mentality of day two worlds, because I imagine that is much more different. So if you guys don't care to kick it off, we will talk about kind of the player mentality before worlds and how you guys have been prepping without giving any kind of secrets away. How have you guys been prepping and practicing for getting ready for worlds?
So this is this is my fifth go around prepping for worlds, and every year it feels like the leading up to worlds, the metagame's different, the scenario's different. Honestly, one thing I've learned is this: you really just have to stay focused on your prep. You can't let your time slip away, because I know we've got nearly 2 months between the last major tournament and the World Championships, and it's summer. There's a lot of new different video games coming out, and people are excited to play different things and things like that. And so you really got to stay focused. It is a little hard to really just grind ladder games, because ladder doesn't really reflect the the world's meta game you're going to be going into. So you really got to focus on your team building theory, and your maybe playing best of 3 sets against friends, practicing certain matchups. You really got to do a lot more than just getting comfortable with your team, and bringing what to like a regional or even nationals. It's just a really different feel to me, and it's been that way for a long time.
Yeah, that's really good insight, man. Staying focused, and I guess that if you stay focused and kind of keep grinding and playing those best of threes and laddering whatever, then you really get comfortable with a team. I know that's I'm not playing in the worlds, so I can't necessarily speak to the worlds caliber of it, but I know for regionals and things like that I've done well. Just knowing my team in and out really helps me place well. Do you guys feel like that's important? Not only prepping well and staying focused, but really kind of focusing in and learning those matchups. Like how, I guess my question, and this is probably what a lot of people would like to ask, how how long do you guys have your teams before your Worlds events?
I can give for
I don't know. You guys can go ahead. I'll answer.
I can give a bit of it onto I think my nationals team because nationals. I mean, obviously that's like the highest, the highest thing I've done so far. I didn't make worlds. I missed it by a little bit, but I mean, for me, like I knew I had to kind of lock down the core I wanted early on, just so I'd be able to keep working on it and find the optimal build for it. So for me, that was Radon at the time. You also, I think it's a balance. I think you have to find something that's obviously, if it sucks against all the popular teams, you shouldn't be using it. I don't think. But you should also be using something that fits your play style or something that you at least understand well. I wanted kind of an offensive core that was a lot like, for me, what I used back in Moon, which was Evil Ogre, splash damage, primal or weather setter, and raw offensive power. So like for me, I didn't really have like the team that I was using until like because I had made that I was playing like Henry at like 3 a.m. at night, and I was having trouble because initially it was Cresselia over Crobat, and he was like, I'm like, oh, okay. So then I ended up changing the Crobat and ended up working out. So I don't necessarily think there's a time frame in which you necessarily need to have a team, but I think if you want to understand it to the best of your ability, you need to start using whatever core you want to use early on, and then the changes that you make along the way are a product of you being able to understand the basic like from that core and what kind of play style that core rewards.
Lou, you had something to add on to that?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say just personally because I have that kind of plays into this a little bit or plays into like pretty well. Because I was playing at or when I played Worlds, and I brought a team that I had used at Nationals. I brought a team that I had used multiple regionals throughout the year that I had like won events with or special. And so I was really, really comfortable with brought it into day one. And I think I went fourth, I was one game shy. And I had like some unfortunate RN also at the same time my best. Can't blame it on our but it was I definitely felt really comfortable playing in the match spike. And I think that's something that kind of depends on who you are as a player. And that the entire question of comfort versus the call also something that I think depends on the player. And this year going into Worlds, I've had my world set for I think like the last month, maybe because that good. So I've been, obviously I'm super familiar with it at this point. I'm like I know every in and out of the team, I know everything I want out of it. I know everything to do, everything to do. And I want to say it's the call at this point and it's comfort, which is something that I think people don't really think about when they have this whole debate on comfort versus call. Like you can easily make the call comfort as well if you just actually try really hard and actually work your ass. And so people oftentimes are like, "Oh man, it's the day before the event. I came up with my team. I think it's the call. I'm gonna go with it." There's really not that much that's keeping you coming up with that team 4 or 5 days ago. After you have that team 4 or 5 days ago, grinding the next 4 or 5 days, and actually grinding and using your time effectively. Because I think the biggest thing is a lot of Pokemon players don't use time effectively. Like they'll come up with a team, they'll hit ladder with a team, ladder for 2 hours and try to make a verdict. Ladder for 3 or 4 hours, try to make a verdict. That's the worst way I can possibly of test laddering for 4 hours. Really, that's just 4 hours. I don't want to go too deep into what I do, just because Worlds is coming up pretty soon.
Yeah.
But in general,
Yeah.
I'll just kind of try to outline usually what I like to do. I like to take my team and focus specifically on. That's really all. That's all I'll say about it. I focus on match more than winning games on ladder, more than getting this perfect spread. Because a lot of times people will make spreads for Mon, spend hours making spreads on Mons, and then whenever they play the matchup, they're not even bringing that Mon against the Mon that they had all these insane calcs, to live. So it's people don't realize how matchup or how important matchups really are, how much they affect not only how you build but also how you customize each of your sets to specific things that you are guaranteed to be facing.
Yeah, and I think it's really
definitely
important
agree
to
with
be
that.
talking about these during team building, to be thinking about which mons you're bringing to which matchups, and kind of understanding your win cons against different archetypes. Because I think, for me at least, that trumps a lot of the quote unquote comfort phase of teams, is knowing my game plan versus them, knowing what 4 mons I'm bringing or what 5 mons I'm bringing, or what, which order I'm bringing my 4 mons in. And then knowing what my win cons are in that game, right? If I can do that versus the 4 most popular archetypes, then I'm going to be destroying ladder, right? You know what I mean? Whether or not I'm comfortable with the team.
Yeah,
Right. And
definitely
that's
agree
the
with
kind of
that.
stuff that I have too. Where my goal was to find something I'm comfortable with, but also just like really make sure that I know how to play whatever team I end up using. And so I guess the way that I'm preparing, and this is my first time playing at World, so I might be doing it totally wrong, and I'll find out in like a month. But my way of prepping is just playing a lot of best of threes, playing against a lot of different archetypes, and not necessarily even just playing to win, but playing to try out all the different strategies that I can think of, try to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And so I have a full arsenal of options when it does come to, I'm playing Zerndon, but it's not standard Zerndon. It's got some weird variant. All my game plans, these are still the ones that are feasible. And so even if I'm not winning every match, if I know what can work and what interactions are good for me, I can try to use that to teams that aren't necessarily a standard.
Yeah, I'm honestly, like, for me, I'm a big believer that for the most part, I think ladder is a waste of time. I think if you're practicing with good players and you're doing best of threes, where you're actually learning how to like apply mons to matchups, I think that's a lot more helpful. Because on ladder, you're always going to find teams with like this weird little tech that makes you kind of paranoid. You're like, oh, what if my opponents have this? When it's like it's one person on ladder. And that being said, too, I think ladder, it does encourage a lot more best of one strategies. Not saying that there aren't 3 teams on there. I do think that in terms of practice, like I definitely benefited side practicing for nationals, and I did all my prep there, as opposed to using ladder as a way to figure out whether my team was solid or not. I just played a ton of games with friends, practicing different archetypes, and when I felt comfortable against all of them, I thought that was a lot more efficient than just playing constant ladder games and hoping that like I would learn it just from doing that.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And then again, sorry guys to kind of cut this short, because again, this is a topic that I would love to take a long time about. But I want to keep things rolling. The next thing I wanted to talk about is kind of this day one mentality. And actually, I'm going to go to Lou for this specifically. And then maybe go to somebody else for what you would believe the mentality to be. Because Lou, I know you played day one in 2017, like you had mentioned earlier. Having that experience from day one, then going into day one now, do you have a pretty good grasp of what your mentality needs to be? And what advice could you give to everyone else?
I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier when I was talking about call, but it depends a lot on the player, right? And how like you handle stress and how you handle pressure. For me, I think I'm different than a lot of Pokemon players because I've competed and played in sports like my entire life, and so I've never been in a period in my life without competition or without pressure or without in team sports, people relying on you and having that pressure of like other people watching and watching the shit that you're doing. And so for me, I kind of enjoy the pressure. I know a lot of people have trouble like playing on and they say stressful fast. And I love playing. I think it's one of the most aspects of Pokemon. So when it comes to mentality, this is actually also another point I want to make, and it's something that I learned, I think, after 2017, which was I'm a lot better at this game when I'm having fun. And so what I really needed to stop doing was putting so much unnecessary pressure on myself because I do good with pressure, right? But there's a difference between just having the standard pressure or standard stress of playing in a competition versus the pressure that you're putting on yourself that is completely unnecessary and beating yourself up over matches. Then once you're beating yourself up over a match, you start going on tilt, then you lose your next match because you're not even in the right headspace. And especially in Worlds, it's very, very rare that someone's just going to go win Worlds. Like, more than likely, you're probably going to lose. And if you're playing Pokemon over the course of an entire day, at least at some point in time, you're probably going to get hoed by orange, right? Like, it's going to happen at some point. So, the mentality to come back from that is really, really important. Not beating yourself up is huge. And personally, what I do for tournament prep to kind of take the edge off a little bit is I'll sit down and I'll just grind like 10 or so games on Showdown before the tournament starts. It's kind of like a little bit of a warm up. Like before I would play soccer, I'd always warm up. I figured it would always just make sense to warm up a little bit when I play Pokemon as well. That way you're not getting into a game and you're not panicking, forgetting, certain stuff that you have on your team if your EV spread is like designed to live this. But I think those are all decent things that most everybody can apply to try to handle, the stress of day one tournaments a little bit better. But again, everybody is different.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to just come up with a blanket solution to dealing with nerves and dealing with day one stress.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I played sports growing up as well, and so I kind of understand the mentality of the pressure I kind of get into you and having to like calm yourself down. So I think that makes a lot of sense because what I got out of that, what I'll maybe even try to apply to my own game is just kind of having fun with it. Looking back on sports, we did do well when the team was having fun in general. Loving the sport that they were playing. So that's solid advice, and I know a lot of players are going to appreciate that. Just to stay calm, realize that they're having fun playing the game that they're playing, and try to do their best. I think that's a really great mindset to have. And then something that maybe you guys can even benefit from, Justin, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about day two. Is there a different mentality that you have to take into it? How much different is day two from day one?
Well, it definitely feels like less of a grind. I know this is kind of talking more about day one, but to me, day one has been it's a lot. It's usually more rounds than day two. It's just kind of really tough to keep your head focused. You really can't think about whoa, this is so far out that you get rattled and it ends up costing you. Day two is shorter. The game, the level of play is a lot higher. I think maybe if you're the type of player that thrives on strong competition and showing respecting your opponents to the point where you're trying to play up to their level. Day two definitely would help players in that regard. And I do think that's helped out a lot of players in the history of Worlds that have performed well. Yeah, I don't see much of a difference other than in terms of metagame, it feels a lot more tame in day two, even if the opponents are tougher. I can't really say much about approaching day two specifically, since this is my first year getting a day two invite. Previous years I've had to go through day one, and then when I get to day two, I have that confidence from I just won 6 to 7 rounds of Pokemon today, so I'm feeling pretty good about tomorrow, and that's usually helped me carry momentum through. I think both times I've made it to day two, I've started off really well. I think 3-1 both times before losing my next two. And I'm usually a person that's used to losing in tournaments early, as opposed to taking late losses. So definitely momentum through day one helps. I'm not sure how day two only is going to work out, but we'll see. A lot of players do well with just day two invites, obviously. So it's definitely still doable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and hopefully all of you guys will be there at day 2. But again, not to cut it short, but unfortunately we are kind of running up close on an hour, and I'm sure you guys have somewhere that you probably need to be. But my last question, and we'll kind of finish it up there, is probably the biggest question that we have when we're talking about a preview, and that's who's going to win Worlds. So I don't know if you guys want to tackle that individually or if you can come to a decision on a group. But besides yourselves, do you see anybody having a strong finish at Worlds this year?
I think individual may be a better approach.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to throw out a few names and, a short, reasoning on why I think they could win Worlds. First one, obviously Wolf Glick. I think he's definitely the favorite of many going into Worlds this year. Definitely looking to strong in his quest to get a second title. I think the second most likely favorite is Hiroshi Poke. I don't know his full real name. He won Japan Nationals, and that was actually his second Japan Nationals win in a row. Japan National champions are very, very strong historically going into Worlds. We, most recently in Ryota Otsubo, winning Japan Nationals and Worlds in 2017. I think other than that, I think Paul Ruiz, last year's champion, he could do really well. I know, maybe people make jokes about sleeping on Latam still, but he did top 4 Worlds and then win Worlds the last 2 years. So I definitely think he's a strong contender to make top cut again, just because he's shown to be very good at the world stage. Nils Dunlop also has made it to top 8 and top 4 Worlds last 2 years. I think he could be very strong. I think he's playing through day 1 also. And lastly, Seijun Park recently announcing that he will be able to play in Worlds this year. So he will be going through day 1. And, he won the World Championships last time it was in Washington, D.C. So we'll see if he can make that a second one in D.C.
Defend his crown, so to speak, in DC. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a kind of a take on, maybe somebody different that they want to put into that pool?
Yeah, maybe for me personally, I'd maybe even put Melvin up there. I mean, Melvin's cut already 2 international championships. So I believe is pretty consistent. Overall, with what he uses, is a huge factor, and he's definitely calm. I mean, I played him at internationals, and he was very calm, always very concentrated. And I think like a player with a mentality like that can do really well. And I'd also agree with Justin on Wolf. I mean, he kind of has plot armor. We'll see how that works.
Yeah. Anybody
I went
else?
to
Go ahead.
hit most of them, but the 2 that I still want to talk about, first off, is Ashton, who has yet to have a great Worlds finish, but might have had the single greatest season in recent memory in terms of Pokemon, where he won an Internats, won 2 regionals, got top 8 at another Internats, just had an incredible season. And so I think that what he brings to Worlds and whether or not he can complete this season with a World Championship or with a great finish there. And the other person is Arash, who's, again, another player who's been on the world stage for a long time, done very well, 2013 champ, got top 8 last year, and will be playing through day 1. But he's another guy who I could absolutely see going from day 1 and making it into top 8 or top 4.
Yeah, those are definitely some strong names to look out for when you guys are competing. I think you guys hit everybody that I would imagine. Like you guys said, I think Wolf is, with all jokes set aside, I think Wolf probably is one of the more favorites to go in. But before we wrap it up, is there anything that you guys would like to say, or anything of that, of that matter?
I mean, for me, I just say, from my experience, like internationals being like my first like good really event, like I could say like that entire time, And I think that that's like was such a big factor of doing well. And I think like for anyone going in the Worlds or just any competition like from here on out, sure that you're enjoying yourself and you're also maybe even getting to know your opponents, talk to them before the match. It doesn't always have to be. Obviously, like sometimes high stress, you need to like really focus, but it doesn't always have to be like this high, like, oh, I can't talk to my opponent, or I can't do that. Like usually it's better if you get to know your opponent, maybe like just have a small conversation with them, see how their day's going. And I think like that for me was like one of the most valuable things I got out of to just be able to talk to like a lot of like good players, just on a normal level, before we actually played. And I think like that's really like.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming on the. Yeah, sorry, somebody had something to add.
Yeah, real quick. I just
Yeah,
wanted to say something really quick.
Yeah.
Okay. Life is short, ladies and gentlemen. All right? Life is goddamn short, okay? And there's a lot of Pokemon players who really love this game, but because they're either not good enough or just don't have the financial means to, never get the ability to play at Worlds, right? Even though for a lot of players it's their dream. So, especially for players who have like made Worlds a couple times or made Worlds a few times, it kind of gets taken for granted, right? So all I just want to say is it's a amazing opportunity. So just enjoy the hell out of it, whether you win or whether you lose. Just be sure that at the end of the day, you make sure that you have a good trip, and the play was the friends that we made along the way.
Super solid advice.
And also, you'll only do well if you run Radon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agree with that one.
But you have to have Slowbro on it.
With
Oh,
slow.
Yes.
no, bro.
That's the
No,
important
Slowbro
one.
Venus or Raichu.
You have to have
Yes.
Jellicent. You have to have
Yes.
Jellicent, dude. Jellicent is the best Pokemon.
All
I
right,
still
guys.
think Slowbro's the best. All right. Thanks for having me on. It was
Absolutely.
Thanks for having
really,
us.
really fun time.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys for coming on the show, and I know everybody watching this is going to appreciate it. So guys that are watching, if you haven't already, join the Discord. We have practice tournaments, conversations about Pokemon, things like that all the time. Of course, that link will be in the description below. If you like the episode and would like to see more, go ahead and subscribe. We're going to be posting a lot of different content through Twitch and YouTube. And again, we just wanted to thank our guests for coming on. And if nothing else, guys, we appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.